The Golden Sun, a Broken Realm story. As his Hearthguard piled into the Shrine of Grimnir and took up defensive positions, Runeson Torjug turned to his Runesmiter and asked the question, How long? How long until we die? Because undoubtedly, they were all going to die. His siblings might still be spitting defiant oaths, but Torjug had seen the stomach-churning ruins of flesh that the invaders had left in the Lodge's clan hall. The legacy of the clan was finished, even if somehow they won this battle. Still, each inch of ground would be paid for in blood. This he so swore. Seconds. Minutes, maybe. The priest shrugged. His flippant tone saw Torjug chuckle. The ruined son made as if to reply and stopped dead. He was not the most handsome of his brothers, but the reflection confronting him in the priest's gleaming mask was grotesque. Sagging skin, half-split belly, swollen tongue, protruding from an eyeless face. More reflections leered from the shrine's gilded sanctuary, each growing more hideous with every passing moment. Heat filled the space as the Runesmiter slammed the butt of his staff against the echoing flagstones, conjuring a wall of fire before the entrance to the hexagonal chamber. Teeth gritted. Torjug shook off the unease he felt and readied his axe. Approaching were footsteps not so much slow as languid, almost bored. They echoed from behind the wall of hissing flame, growing progressively closer. Torjug felt his teeth grinding, fingers drumming on the grip of his weapon. The footsteps stopped at the blazing barrier. The flames rippled and bulged outwards with a roar. They burst apart before reforming, framing a tall figure with a cloak billowing in his wake. Fiery light shone from him so brightly that even Torjug was forced to look away, but the Fyreslayer recovered in time to unhook a throwing axe and add it to those hurled by his Hearthguard. Most burst in mid-air before the figure. His own spun end over end on its murderous path. There was a flash of golden movement, and suddenly the invader was holding the axe, his blade inches from his head. As he tossed the weapon away, the Runeson beheld the intruder's face. Despite himself, the Duradin felt his arms slacken. He was beautiful, so very, very beautiful. The vile cruelty dancing in his eyes somehow intensified that fact. Greetings, the beautiful death grinned, unsheathing a silvered rapier. Rejoice, for I'm about to murder every last one of you. 66, 67, 68. The last syllable was strained as Fyreslayers lodged into a screaming Duradin, objecting fiercely to being forced past the sacred echo of 66. The Geld Prince tutted before ripping the sword free and letting the bisected creature topple. A smirk crossed Sigvald's face before he pirouetted. His blade cut true this time, severing the heads of two Duradin leaping from behind. Flicking their blood from the demon-forged steel, Sigvald turned to catch another blow on his mirror shield, lashing out with a wicked rim and nearly slicing another Duradin's throat. 71. Driving his foot through the mask of the priest he had slain moments prior, shattering the thick skull beneath, Sigvald turned to the last foe, some Duradin prince. This one was clearly struggling to muster his own defiance in the face of Slaanesh's favored son. Mouth agog, eyes half glazed. Sigvald couldn't blame him. The Geld Prince drew himself up and flicked his golden hair, letting the guttering wall of fire cast him in a silhouette. Give this creature a sight to remember before he dies. Suddenly, the Duradin appeared to steel himself. Flame spat from his axe as he struck, almost singeing Sigvald's immaculate flesh. The Geld Prince's arm lanced forward, the tip of Fyreslayer punching through the Duradin's chest. The warrior went rigid as the blood jetted from his mouth, eyes alight with defiance as Sigvald hefted his impaled form. With a chuckle, the Geld Prince flicked the tip of the blade upwards, allowing the Duradin to slip down the metal right to the hilt. Being so close to the creature's musty breath was odious, but the chance for a final cutting remark was too enticing to pass up. As Sigvald opened his mouth to deliver just that, the Duradin froze again, eyes bulging. Curling his lips in shock, the Magnificent then gave a snarl of disgust as its victim burst open, spraying him with blood and intestines. Hurling the corpse away with a flick of shard slash, Sigvald turned wild-eyed to the sound of the fire dying behind him. A vast shape loomed through the gloom of the Durden tunnels, obscured by a cloud of thick incense. The snake-shaped head of the palanquin all but scraped the passage's roof as it was dragged forward, surrounded by screeching warriors who fell upon the butchered Durden to devour their flesh. Sigvald cared less than nothing for them. His focus was on the palanquin, the bloated, oiled figure at its heart, to be precise. "So," Sigvald called out, arms splayed in a magnanimous fashion, "at last, you're coming to offer tribute?" Glutos Orsilian, the Lord of Gluttony, offered nothing more than a snort. Leaning further back into his opulent divan, the sorcerer took a bite from a severed arm and returned to an apparently deep conversation with the head of his staff. In his place, a bald priestess stepped to the edge of the palanquin, pinched features drawn in a smile. "The great Glutos Orsilian, he who is Grand Gourmand, already knew of your joining us in this endeavor." "Joining you? Hardly," Sigvald interrupted, one perfect eyebrow arching. "You are the ones who've come to find me, after all." A twitch pulled at the priest's features, but her smile did not abate. "Where's your decadent host, Geld Prince?" "I grew bored of them," Sigvald sighed, waving a hand. "And I have no time for those who cannot keep up. 72. At her frown, the Magnificent smirked, gesturing at the corpses piled around them. 72 of these little menaces I've exterminated. You were keeping count, my dear Orsilian." "Ah, so that's the game we're playing," came a rich, baritone voice before the woman could respond. Instantly, the Hedonites surrounding the palanquin abased themselves, faces pressed to the floor. Hopes for Glutos to physically stand might have been too much, but the Lord of Gluttony managed to lean forward from his piled satin cushions, hand resting on a meaty thigh. Even such lackadaisical motion sent every jowl and fold of glistening flesh rolling. Orsilian gave an indulgent smirk. "A trite barb, noble Geld Prince, and if I may say so, somewhat desperate." Glutos chuckled. Snapping his fingers, a stunted little wretch waddled from around the back of the palanquin, offering up a plate upon which sat a fresh-looking brain. Glutos wasted no time in taking a bite, nodding as cerebral fluid cascaded down his chins. "Those of our master's children who revel with me whisper of your unhappy fate. Stuck in a lump of glass for a millennia? I appreciate that you have plenty of catching up to do compared to we more established, shall we say, individuals, but baiting me is beneath you." Sigvald was going to kill this presumptive wretch. That much the Geld Prince had decided within seconds of laying eyes upon him. The only question was when, and each word that spilled over the corpulent champion's lips brought that time closer and closer. Yet, with the eyes of Glutos's host on him, he could not allow himself to lose his temper. Standards had to be maintained. As I said, 72. "An impressive count, to be sure," Glutos nodded, shuddering with a grunt of delight as he wolfed down the last of the brain and licked his fat fingers. "But consider this. I, myself, have personally laid 66 souls upon the Dark Prince's feasting table this day. A more auspicious total by far. I am sure you will agree. Or did that slip your mind also while you were waiting to be rescued?" Shard Slash twitched, its edge catching the low torchlight with menacing intent. In response, the Lord of Gluttony chortled and made some gesture with his staff. Sigvald's murderous smirk froze as he felt his guts begin to churn, straining against his sculpted form. As his own dark blessings warred with the rival's champion's sorcery, he let out a wary chuckle, eyes narrowing. "Now, Glutos, let's not do anything regret, Any reply was forestalled as the effigies of the Durden warrior god lining the chamber suddenly exploded, showering both Sigvald and the lumpen beast that pulled Glutos's palanquin with gilded shrapnel. Blinking in surprise, Sigvald watched as the golden fragments skittered towards one another, coalescing into a singular mass. The thrashing immensity took on a sinuous shape, a two-headed serpent, one visage sleek and refined, the other an angular mass of shining horns and fangs. As the latter had moved to tear into the Dordan corpses, mingling them into more twisted forms, the former cast its lidless gaze about the chamber before focusing on the two champions. Geld Prince, Lord of Gluttony, enough. Your squabbles avail the Dark Prince not. Make for the Howling Lands, where the glimmering spear mirrors past and future. There will the banquet be laid out. Its cryptic message delivered, the entity gave a screech as it dissented from within and burst apart. This time, Sigvald was prepared, shield raised to deflect the sharp fragments. As he lowered the great burnished disc, there was silence. Even the rapturous mewing of Glutos' disciples had thankfully ceased. Clicking his tongue, Sigvald glanced up at his opposite number. The Lord of Gluttony seemed to be recovering, but the look he shot Sigvald was no less wary for that. Something in it amused Sigvald, his vengeful anger abating, if not forgotten. Snorting, the Geld Prince sheathed his blade, moving to leave the chamber. He was tired of this place anyways. Well then, shall we? That was The Golden Sun, a Broken Realms short story that you could find on the Warhammer community site. I will have a link down at the bottom if you want to read it yourself. I did have to replace the word mercifully with thankfully because I could not say it no matter how many times I tried, and I'm sorry for that. I really enjoyed this story. I got to see Glutos and Sigvald talking to each other. Some of the best heroes there are. When we all agree they are the best heroes of Age of Sigmar, because really they are the good guys, right? I mean, other than my fanboying aside, I like this story. It's a fun little short story, and you get to see how two champions of the same god interact with each other. Like they take on different forms of Slaanesh, and how that can kind of cause a little bit of tension between them. Not only do these blessed heroes want to one-up each other, typically within Chaos, but you get to see how different aspects of the gods can lead to different outcomes in like the blessings you receive. You got Glutos with the overindulgence, and you got Sigvald with the perfection, and they're coming together. It's a pretty nice little looky-loo at it all. I would like to see like Khorne and Tzeentch and Nurgle champions talking to each other and interacting kind of in the same way, seeing how maybe there are stories like that, and I haven't seen them yet, or I haven't gotten around to them yet. But I want to see like the interplay between like well-known, well-established champions that can't just straight up just murder each other because of the fallout that would happen. That you have to be better about it within the same faction, because you see stuff like that all the time with different Chaos Lords for different gods. That happens plenty, but I want to see the in-house stuff, and like how do you keep them in line? It kind of like Neferata, the short story, the book with Neferata, the very first one. It kind of shows a Khorne warband going through, and you kind of see some play in that, and like some trying to undermine each other, but like they really don't dive into it and explore it that much. And granted, to be fair, it was a Neferata book. They really shouldn't. But I really like this short story. I really do hope they give us another Sigvald book in AOS, because I did really enjoy the fantasy Sigvald book. I would love to see a Glutos book. I think that'd be a fun character to follow around and see how his interactions go between him and his followers, him and like being the leader in a war, him and his demon pact, to say the least. Just want to see all of that too with Glutos, and maybe like some perspectives from like the Painbringers and the Blissbarb archers and stuff. I really want to see more of like on the ground like stories from Chaos's side, and not just the Khorne side or Nurgle side, because I feel like they get a lot of the books for the most part. But yeah, that was The Golden Sun and my thoughts on it and my feelings. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching and listening. Have a great day.